Hi there, Fiona.
Hi.
So we met several years ago. I guess it would have been probably around 2013 or 14 or something like that at
Mhm.
the Toronto School of Theology, where I was a student at one of the Anglican affiliated colleges, and you were a student at one of the Roman Catholic affiliated colleges. We had some classes together. And you've gone from your master's at that point now to your doctorate. So the colleges at Toronto School of Theology come from different church denominations, and the students come from even more. So what was that ecumenical experience like for you?
It was, it's an interesting experience, right? You have all these different perspectives and all these different kind of foundational theologies that influence our thinking. I think the ecumenical background really just affirmed our need for dialogue and for genuine dialogue, not just us listening to one another and not allowing our different points of view to challenge our thinking, but also for it to change how we see the world. Like, I know there's obviously differences between the Roman Catholic kind of understanding of sexuality and some Anglican circles in understanding sexuality as well. And so listening to one another, you understand where each other are coming from, and also how our own points of view miss certain aspects of how to kind of engage that topic. So I think it really, strengthened our own faith because it helped us understand our own faiths better, but also it challenged us to, be open to dialogue and allow for that change to happen within us.
You are reminding me of one of my professors in my undergrad who was big in interreligious dialogue and ecumenical dialogue. And he would say things like, he would never say there is such a thing as like Buddhism. He would say there are Buddhists. And so what I'm hearing as you're describing your experience, it's like it was helpful to meet actual people living the faith. And that sort of brings you past some of your assumptions because you're meeting a real person rather than your idea or the press statement or something like that.
Oh, definitely. I remember reading like feminist theologians who speak about how women engage in interreligious and ecumenical dialogue through working with one another for a cause. And that helped them recognize that it's their, their religion and their understanding of their faith, it's just part of who they are, first of all. And it's not just doctrines and written statements kind of thing. And I think it just helps us realize the humanity between one another and also, within the cause itself. And it's not just let's figure out these statements kind of thing.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly. Well, what led you in your own life's journey to study theology academically?
It's an interesting story. So I was part of the rites to Christian initiation at my parish. So I was actually baptized into the Roman Catholic denomination fairly, I guess you can say young, but also kind of late in life. I was 14, while a lot of my friends were cradle Catholics kind of thing. And so I always had this kind of love for, the stories in the Bible and everything. And I thought, going to Catholic school as well, I really loved the course religion. And so I wanted to be a religion teacher coming out of university. But then in my fourth year, I had the opportunity to take Intro to New Testament and Intro to Old Testament courses you would know as part of the graduate level. But then I had the chance to do it in my fourth year of undergrad through the Faculty of Theology at St. Mike's. And so I really enjoyed the courses there, and I really enjoyed the atmosphere that I had. And so I asked one of my undergrad profs, like, what do you think I should do? Should I continue with, potentially going to the teaching stream, doing a B.Ed, or should I do the master's kind of thing? And he was like, you can always go back to teaching if, you don't like theology in the end. And so I took that as go for it kind of thing. And here I am.
Wow, that's great. And so, um, My understanding is that you've been studying Mary specifically as part of your doctorate at Regis College, which is that Wellesley Street in Toronto? Is that where people would find it?
Wellesley, yeah.
Great. So yeah, tell me about what brought you to studying that topic in particular, and what exactly is your dissertation going to be about?
All right. So there's a course back in, I guess, a couple of years ago, but I'm sure they keep offering it. It was called Marriage and Sexuality, and it was taught by Moira McQueen back at St. Mike's. And so, Catholic sexuality and marriage is circled around Theology of the Body by John Paul II. And he also wrote documents on womanhood and connections with Mary. And so there's the document Mulieris Dignitatem, the dignity of women kind of thing. And as part of the course, we had to read those. And I always struggled with how he framed sexuality and marriage, and especially locating the female kind of vocation, the center of womanhood kind of thing in Mary, but then it's his understanding of Mary in like a more motherhood kind of aspect. And so from there, I just had like struggles like, is she really that relevant to us if she's always just presented as a mother,
Mm.
you know? And so that's how I started questioning these things. And that led to my current project. And I argue that Mary, as presented by JP2, and frankly, a lot of the Roman Catholic clergy would still present her as such, as mother, is not as relevant to women such as myself, Canadian-born Chinese women. And I argue that it's because she's not enculturated for us. She doesn't embody who we are as beings. And so I go into then, CBC women, Canadian born Chinese women. We experience the world in a more hybrid sense. A lot of bicultural, bilingual people would also experience this. But that, the Chineseness and the Canadianness is not just like two separate spheres, but it's intertwined with one another, and it kind of informs our way of being in this world. And so it has greater ramifications. And so I see that and Mary the Pontifex, an image that's normally used in Muslim Christian dialogue, Mary the bridge builder, as more of a relevant or suitable role model for us, because she does this bridge building between these two cultures back then. And for us, we also act as bridge builders between, the Canadian and Chinese culture or other cultures that we're engaged in, through like mediating these cultures with interested parties, or translating for our parents in like, teacher parent interviews kind of thing back when we were kids. And so I'm rooting it in that experience and trying to say that even though it was particular experiences in our lives, it's actually a deeper kind of way of being that we have. And so through that kind of hermeneutical lens and seeing Mary as operating in the same way, she becomes a better role model for us.
That's interesting, the image of Mary as a bridge builder, because sometimes priesthood is described as being like creating a bridge between God and humanity. So did the image or idea of Mary as a sort or a type or image of priest come up in any of your research?
Yes, so there's historically there were a group of women who used to like give out, I say bread, but like I guess kind of like mini Eucharists in a sense to people. I think they were called Colliandrians or something like that. But basically they were connected to Mary as well. And it's interesting because our Pope is called the Pontifex kind of thing, the major bridge builder between humanity and the divine. And so I would say in part of my implication that if we're able to see Mary as a bridge builder, then maybe this title is not just limited to the priesthood, or at least to the Pope kind of thing.
Interesting. Well, and I mean, I suppose, and scripture talks about like God creating a kingdom of priests, or in some traditions, they will say the priesthood of all believers. So in a sense, we all as Christians, all the baptized have a bridge building vocation, including the laity. And so, and I guess my understanding is that the ordained priesthood is there to help support the laity and work alongside the laity in that uh, bridge building vocation. And I mean, and isn't that something for us to maybe dwell on, like in a world where there's so much violence and disagreement and tearing each other down, like the church ideally there to build bridges rather than tear down.
That is definitely interesting. And I was just thinking while you were talking that, you know, at least from the people that I know, especially within my denomination, we tend to think of it as that's the priest's job kind of thing, right? To spread the word of God kind of thing, to do this bridge building between humanity and the divine. But then when we see Mary as a model for us, and I think you were hinting at the Magnificat when you were emailing me, it calls for us to do this bridge building as well, right? And so we're supposed to go out and denounce the injustices in the world, and we're supposed to bring the good news to the world, right? And even though we can't, all have, Jesus physically born with like us giving birth to Jesus kind of thing, we're still acting as that bridge in the sense of we're bridging the divine word out to people. And so on that level, that image of Mary as a bridge builder, as a role model, really helps us kind of take on that ownership, I think.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else from your studies that you would like to share with those who are watching? Some highlights for you?
Some highlights. Well, personally, because I'm focused on like an enculturated image of Mary, I find it interesting that like I was just thinking how a lot of mothers would be able to connect to the image of Mary as mother. And I was thinking like this is because she does embody the way of being for them. Not all mothers and not all forms of motherhood will be the same, but it does entail some form of, taking care of the children, worrying about them kind of thing. And that's why it's such a good image for, contemporary mothers. But then for all of the rest of us who aren't in that um, state of being, it's hard to find an image of Mary that really answers to and, in a sense, sympathizes with the way that we live. And so I think enculturation is not just an image of Mary that looks like a Chinese woman kind of thing, right? She has to really embody our way of understanding that world in order for us to really have a connection with her, or at least for the Roman Catholics.
Interesting. Okay, so what about in your own life then? Well, your own, if you're comfortable talking about your own maybe spiritual practices, or just
Mhm.
personally, what role does Mary play in your own life then as a young woman?
Initially, she always felt like a guardian, someone in heaven above who can connect me to Jesus and bring my prayers to him, because she's so much more efficient in doing so kind of thing. We call her the mediatrix for that reason. Um, but I think recently, because I've been thinking along the lines of her as a bridge builder and the Magnificat, um, it changed my understanding of how I can be more like her. And I think in my own ways of trying to bring awareness to social justice issues, to the injustices of the world, trying to help us see how Mary is still in the world. Like, for example, the mothers who suddenly lose their children because of political strife kind of thing. And pointing to that, like, yes, this is like, we need to address this because this is what Mary felt kind of thing. I think it changed how my relationship with her have become, really.
Wow. So there you've seen some growth through your academic studies. Like it's not just been one part of yourself that you leave behind in school, but it's like it's really helped to transform your whole outlook, it seems.
Yeah, I think it would be hard to say that what we read and what we write don't really affect how we believe as well. I think you would understand that as well. Like how when we start researching and reading like textbooks and stuff, it does challenge us to think differently and engage in the world differently.
Yeah. Yeah, I forget who it was, or maybe it's lots of people, but like I remember someone saying something like, if religion just has to do with religion, like then I'm not interested. If it
Mhm.
has to do with life, then sign me up.
Yeah. And there's always that question of why is theology still a subject at the university kind of thing. And
Mhm.
it's that need for theology to really engage in that world and to answer the same questions that science and political science are answering that makes us, we need to stay relevant. And these are issues that people are facing, and God, the gospel, etc., have something to say to it.
Yeah, it's a conversation partner in all of that,
Mhm.
certainly. Well, now in some forms of Anglicanism and certainly in many other non-Roman Catholic denominations, there's often like a total avoidance of Mary. I see it as sort of like a Reformation 16th century overcorrection. What case would you make to those who are watching for not entirely avoiding Mary in their lives, maybe embracing her more fully?
I totally understand. Like, even sometimes for myself, it's kind of like that seems a little too much towards like a spectrum kind of thing, the Catholic devotions, etc.
Mhm.
And so I would just challenge one another to see her as a model of faith, right? Like, even if we're just looking at the Annunciation, she said this yes to God, right? And th- even though we don't really know anything about her, she one of the gospels say that she ends up being at the cross. The Acts of the Apostles says that she ends up being, with the early church praying at Pentecost kind of thing. And it shows that her yes, like she literally lived that yes throughout her life. And so, we see the little snippets of Jesus as a kid earlier. And so I think we can sympathize with her. Like, when she loses her child running around Jerusalem, it's like this yes that she had now entails that she has to worry about another human being kind of thing running around Jerusalem lost. But it's also when she was just pregnant, like she wouldn't have known culturally of the dangers that she had to face as an unofficially wedded woman and having a child out of wedlock kind of thing. And it calls us to, say yes to God in hardships. I personally do see it's hard at times to say yes to God in our contemporary world. Like, there's just so many different challenges in this world and so many different influences in there that makes it hard to commit fully to God. And to for her to have to live out that yes to, the point that she had to witness her child dying. I think it calls us to really to commit our lives in that way to God. And so she could be a model of faith to how, like, the implications of saying yes. And so I would just challenge some people to see her as that.
Well, and that I think is a good note to come close to an end on, that idea of Mary as a model of discipleship. And so if those watching in their life of discipleship want to pursue this topic anymore, do you have any authors or books or websites or movies or videos that you would recommend?
There are a couple. For those who are more into feminist theology, there's always Elizabeth Johnson's "Truly Our Sister." That's a hallmark of it. And while she does write from a Catholic faith, she does also have historical Mary in there, and so it could be interesting for those who want to know more about her. And also there's Yaroslav Pelikan's Mary Through the Centuries, Marina Warner, Alone of Her Sex. And so those ones are more of how the image of Mary has changed throughout history. And so I think those ones would be interesting reads as well.
That's great. Well, thank you, Fiona, for being with St. Andrews on this important day in the church year. And we wish you well with your studies. And just, yeah, it's been really good to reconnect over the last little while.
Thank you.
Great. Peace.
Thanks.